thank you guys for coming, and just kind of want to start off by thanking our scouts, our coaches, the entire organization, our medical staff, just for our analytics staff, just for the hard work that they've put in over a long time now to kind of get through this weekend. And I think it was a very successful weekend for the Green Bay Packers, and we're just really excited to add these guys to our roster, and couldn't be happier with the process. And with that, I'll take questions.
All right, we'll go ahead and start with Ryan Wood.
Hey, Brian, there was a report today that Aaron's condition on returning is that you're no longer the GM. Has that been communicated to you in any way with your communication with him, with Mark, or with anyone?
Aaron hasn't said anything like that to me, and certainly hasn't said anything publicly. So I think it's a little unfair to kind of put that on him. But listen, you certainly don't like to hear those things, but at the same time, it's kind of part of the gig in the National Football League. So. But no, nothing's been communicated directly to me.
Mike Spofford.
Hey, Brian, when you look at the draft class here as a whole and what you did at cornerback, running back, linebacker, offensive line specifically, do you feel you've put together the type of competition that you're going to want, for some of those roster spots and playing time here as 2021 unfolds?
Yeah, I do. It's we have a very good football team coming back, and we picked 9 guys in today's draft and signed a bunch right as we speak here. And I do. Our football team is going to be a hard team to make. At the same time, the quality of the individuals, the talent level, and not only that, but the people that we're bringing in from this particular draft class, I feel very good about improving not only the top of our roster, but then also kind of the back end as well.
M.K. Burgess.
Brian, how would you compare, and what would you say is the biggest strength of this year's draft class compared to last year's?
It's interesting. I think the offensive line group this year was very deep throughout the draft. Even as we got down there towards the lower rounds, and even in free agency, we had some guys we really liked. Last year's receiver class was really strong up top. But I think overall, they're pretty equal draft classes. I think where this class was a little light was probably in the undrafted free agent market, just because of the number of players that opted to play next season in 2021 back in college.
Matt Schneidman.
Ryan, Cole was telling us that when you guys called him, it came up as a likely spam call. What was that call just like for you guys to be able to make? And I'm sure you could have walked to his house and told him, but what was that moment like for you and Matt?
No, it was pretty cool. Obviously, there's not many times where we're going to be able to select a player in the draft from Bayport High School, but couldn't have been happier to do so. Unique that it kind of fell the way it did. I think everybody was really excited when we started getting close to that pick that he was still alive on our board. And then a bunch of the guys, kind of making jokes about which bar in town he was at watching the draft. So. But now, obviously Wisconsin does such a good job with their football program overall, but specifically with their old linemen over the years. And he's been trained well, not only at Wisconsin, but at Bayport High School. And I think he's ready for the challenge that the National Football League and the Green Bay Packers will bring.
Andy Herman.
Hey, Brian, this is your first draft since Ted's passing. I'm sure this has been a challenging weekend for a variety of reasons. Have you had a chance to reflect on your time with Ted and how he maybe got through some similar challenges and anything you learned from him?
Yeah. I reflect on it all the time, and I actually really appreciate that question. I haven't had, since the draft ended, I haven't reflected too much, but I draw on my experiences with Ted Thompson all the time, not only in this profession, but then just life in general. He was such a good friend, such a unique human being, and it was such a good leader here, and he went through some tough times, as you guys know, and just kind of seeing how he walked with integrity and grace and humility and honesty. I always take those things with me.
Steve McGarkey.
Hunter, you went back to offensive line and cornerback again today. I didn't know how much that was wanting to fill those spots and how much was just the board falling your way. And also, with Cole, do you see him as a tackle or a guard or both?
Sure. First part of that question is a little bit of both. We certainly wanted to target corners and offensive linemen in this draft. I think subconsciously, sometime as you go through the beginning parts of building your board, those things kind of take place, just how your team is at the current time, and some of those guys got lifted, I think. But we were targeting that a little bit. And then with Cole, I think that's one of the things we've tried to do here over the past few years is the flexibility part, just to be able to play multiple positions. And I certainly think he can do that. He doesn't have your traditional height and length of some tackles, but we think he's got the athleticism to play out there. And we feel he's very ideally suited inside as well.
Mike Clemens.
Hey, Brian.
Mike.
It seemed like it came off the board at a nice pace today for you. It filled different needs. But earlier this year, you talked about a needed inside linebacker. Mm-hmm. Do you still have some options on your pro personnel board to bring in some experience there?
Yeah, we do. And I think we're going to have to take a look at that as we move forward. It's, inside backer was one of those things, obviously, that we were hoping to address maybe early in the draft. Just didn't happen to fall that way for us. So yeah, as we move forward, and I've talked a lot about roster building being 365 days a year, and so we'll continue to to look at that. I do like a lot of the young players we have in that room, and I'm expecting those guys to take big jumps, and there'll be good competition in that room. But it just didn't fall early like we wanted it to. We were super happy to kind of get there to the end and pick up Isaiah McDuffie. Not only as an inside linebacker, but he has, we think he has a really good chance to be a special teams player.
Tom Silverstein.
Hey, Brian, were some of the picks at the end, how much of that was aimed at your special teams? Were you actually thinking about special teams as you were making some of those picks?
Absolutely, Tom. I think, a little bit, we always look at the value that each player in the draft kind of brings us in special teams. And obviously, Amari Rodgers early is somebody who's going to be a big factor on teams. But as we got, later in the draft, I think it was okay. You want to give these guys the best opportunity to make your team, and certainly special teams is a big factor in that. So, it was on our minds quite a bit as we went through the final 4 or 5 picks.
Ross Uglum.
Brian, after you took Eric in the first round, you mentioned that part of that was because you don't have a ton of corners. You didn't have a ton of corners under contract long term. Amari has kind of a specific role in your receiver room, and that room doesn't have a ton of guys under contract in the long term. Did things just not fall your way, or where are you at kind of with your wide receiver room?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we added Amari, and then we actually, we'll add a few undrafted free agents here. But yeah, no, I think obviously as you mentioned, going into 2022, we have some holes. I do think there's some guys we're certainly going to try to bring back that are with our group now. So we'll kind of see how that unfolds. But we had some guys later in the draft that we were hopeful that might still be there, but the draft kind of moves at its own speed, and they weren't there when we were ready to pick.
Thank you.
Mark Daniels.
Hey, Brian, do you think the opt-out really hurt Kyle? And I thought he was going to go a little higher than that. And how much of a recommendation did Luke give you on that kid?
Yeah, probably a little bit. I think each player, that opt-out thing kind of affected him differently. Having Luke here on staff and, being at Mississippi State with him for a little while was super helpful to get through some of those things. So, John Eric Sullivan and was a big fan of Kylan from the get-go. He's a very talented individual. So we were surprised to see him on the board that late, and kind of holding our breath there in the 7th round, but we were excited to get him. I think he can add, obviously, he's an explosive athlete as a runner, catches the ball pretty well, and he may be able to add some special teams value as well.
Bill Huber.
Hey, Brian, I'm sure you're sick of talking about Rodgers like most of us are, but in the last 3 days, you've got on Thursday, the big report came out. Then Friday, there's talk that he could retire. Then what happened Saturday? How do you get past this part? Never mind the big picture, but how do you get past this pissing match kind of stuff?
Yeah, I don't know if I really look at it like that, Bill. I think obviously there's some things can become complicated, and we're working through it the best we can. We've been working through it for a while, and again, we're very optimistic that we can get through this. For what's best for the Green Bay Packers, which is Aaron suiting up for us this fall.
Olivia Reiner.
Hey, Brian, when you look back at the pre-draft process without the combine, the challenges getting medical info, opt-outs, what information did you find yourself relying on the most to make decisions today?
Yeah, I think, Olivia, it's a good question. I think, like most years, it's the tape, right? We always go back to the tape. But we are so blessed to have such a fantastic organization. Not only our scouts, our coaches, certainly our medical staff. We have a great football technology staff that includes some analytics stuff that we work on. So I do think this year the medical information was just different than it ever has been. And again, we're fortunate to have Flea and Pat, Doc Eben, Nate, all those guys. They do such a good job, and they kind of had to work overtime to get this all underneath the timeline we needed it to make the decisions we did. But I felt really good about it this weekend.
Rob Domofsky.
Hey, Brian, I realize that the draft is it's a long-term, thing for your organization, multiple years down the road. But how, if at all, do you feel like you helped the 2021 team this weekend?
Yeah, it's interesting. Every year you end up with a bunch of guys. You never really know how it's going to pan out, but you always usually have a little bit of a feeling how quickly these guys can adapt. And I feel really good about this group. I think there's some guys that are going to help us immediately, and I just think they're all suited kind of for long-term success in the NFL. I know that's very rare and it doesn't always happen, but I like all these guys' chances.
Jason Wilde.
Hey, Goody, I know you talked about Ted a little bit earlier. I was going to ask about him too. That summer of 2008, one of the things that I was always amazed by was some of your colleagues talking about how whenever anybody in the building got really pissed at Brett, it was Ted that said, it can't be easy for him. We can't, would it be nice to be able to pick up the phone as you deal with what you're dealing with right now and ask him for advice? And what do you think he'd say if you could call him?
That was my question.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it would be nice just to pick up the phone and talk to him for a lot of reasons. I would actually, just quite frankly, with our staff and kind of what we're doing the process-wise in the draft room, I think he would enjoy that immensely. And we obviously would, could only be better by having him around. But, he used to, it took me about 5 years to figure out what he meant, but he used to have this saying that he would say every once in a while. And he's like, when things got tough, he would say, well, they might kill you, but they won't eat you. And I had no idea for about 5 years what that meant, but what it meant was you're just too damn tough. And but he had a lot of those sayings, as you guys know, guys that have been around him. And but I think Ted, when I watched him go through whether it was significant hard times or just the normal times, the thing that Ted always tried to do, specifically with our players, but was what was best for the Green Bay Packers and what was best for the player. And sometimes those were hard things to figure out. But that was kind of, you guys know him. I mean, he was kind of committed to that. And I think, certainly, we've kind of carried that mantra through since he's been gone.
Pete Doherty.
Hey, Brian, I was wondering, is need baked into your grading system at all? As in, when you're looking at a prospect, is part of the grade how he compares to who you have on the roster? I've read that, that's part of Belichick's system, for instance.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think, so to answer your question, I think it is, but it's not something that is like part of our grading scale. I've always believed that kind of subconsciously the way our evaluation process is done, that our guys it's all about our team. It's not necessarily, we're not grading for the league or grading for our team and what we look for. So certainly the way your roster is constructed at any moment, I think subconsciously kind of gets into, our scouts and certainly our February and March and April processes as we move through. So I don't think it's something we have to kind of, intentionally put in there. I think it happens kind of organically. So certainly every year we go into the draft, when it's all said and done, and you look up there and it seems to be guys are pushed up a little higher at our areas of need than other places. So you got to be careful, I think, of just stacking it like that on purpose, because then you can make some mistakes.
Aaron Nagler.
Brian, from the outside looking in, it sure seems like there were a couple of guys this year that maybe dipped below a couple of the thresholds we love to try and suss out from the outside looking in. Of course, you're never going to give that up. I understand that.
Right.
But is some of that driven by such a unique college football season and an off season where you didn't really have the normal access to medical and maybe the on-site scouting you would have had normally?
Yeah, probably a little bit. That's probably fair, just without the combine. And certainly pro days, some pro days were run much differently where, usually at a pro day, the scouts kind of come in and they run the entire pro day how they want, and the university and the coaches they support us in what way we need to. This year, because of COVID and some of the different rules, that wasn't always the case. Some places you went, the staff at the university kind of had to run it for you. So that's probably a little bit fair. I know as I went into it, I wanted to come out each pick with really good football players, and I think at the end of the day that I was really happy with what we came out with.
Chris Roth.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Chris.
Real quick, how concerned are you that this situation with Aaron is going to filter into other players who are going to be up for contracts, specifically Devontae Adams? Those two are very close. Obviously, there's a big decision and a lot of money coming his way. Are you concerned about that trickle-down effect?
You know what? I don't know if I've given it a ton of thought. I think obviously, with all our players that might be up for contract, I mean, we have a very good football team. This is a great organization. I think, any player would be thrilled to be able to play here. But I'm concerned. I'm always concerned about our football team and where we're headed. But nothing specific has really crossed my mind at this moment.
Ryan Wood.
Ryan, I wanted to follow up on something you said Thursday night about communication. If it's a requisite for Aaron to be more included on personnel decisions, is there any room for that? Is that something that you're open to doing, or is that just not the way that things are done?
No, absolutely. And quite frankly, I think, over the past 3 years since I've been doing this, I mean, I've always welcomed that input. I think he has such an experience in this league that, that input would be always something vitally important to me if he's willing to give it. And so, that's not new. And it's not unique.
Andy Herman.
Hey, Brian, as of this moment, I believe there's still only 2 quarterbacks on the roster. Let's say something happens to Aaron due to injury or other. What's the confidence that Jordan would be able to start and perform at a high level?
Well, obviously, we think the world of Jordan and where he's going to go and develop. I think it's pretty early to kind of, be able to tell you that, because obviously with no preseason game last year, but preseason games last year, and then just the kind of the no spring. But we have a lot of confidence in his talents and his work ethic and where he's going to go. But it's a little early for that.
Matt Schneidman.
Maybe I just am an idiot, but how is a guy like Shamar available late in the 5th, given what he did at App State? Were you surprised he was still there, and what do you think you're getting in him?
Yeah, I really was, and it was he was a favorite of a bunch of our scouts. We kind of have a certain process we go through in the final 3 weeks before the draft, and where guys get together and they work for our board from the bottom up, and this was a guy that just was the outlier for them. They were so excited to try to move this guy up the board, which we did. So as it unfolded, I mean, I got a lot of taps on my shoulder during those period of times about him being on the board and available. So we were thrilled to be able to select him.
Ross Uglum.
Brian, actually kind of piggybacking on Matt and Aaron, Shamar maybe doesn't have the athletic testing numbers of a lot of the corners that you've drafted, and can't help but notice that the Packers site lists him as a DB, not a CB. Do you see him potentially inside, and do you maybe have slightly different thresholds for guys that you see as an inside corner?
I do think he has a really good chance to play inside at nickel and do some of those things. I also think he's a very strong athlete, even though he doesn't have great height. That will allow him to play outside if we need to. I do think we looked at him as a guy who could come in and compete inside and learn from some of our guys. He's got a lot of twitch, and obviously he gets his hands on a lot of balls. So he had a very productive year this past year at App State, and just a great kid, and he'll fit really well in our locker room as well. So, again, you guys know how we strive for versatility, and he has a little bit of that.
Bill Rabier.
Hey, Brian, you talked about the addition of the cornerbacks, and is that sort of a nod to Joe Barry and his system that he wants to put in, or are you just trying to bolster the room?
Yeah, I think it's more about the room and what, not only what we have now, but then what we're going to have moving forward. So I think we needed to add some competition for this year, and I think we needed to add some guys who will be under contract moving forward. So a little more of that.
Bill Huber.
What do you think you got at the offensive tackle spot, Brian? Obviously, you're Dave's hurt coming back. You got a bunch of tweeners. You drafted two guys who maybe can play tackle, maybe not. You don't really know about Yash yet.
Yeah, I mean, again, we really, kind of pride ourselves on the versatility of guys be able to kind of swing back and forth. And I talked, I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before, about Elton and Billy Turner and their ability to play on the edge and inside. And I think both of these guys are going to have some of that flexibility too. I mean, obviously Billy and Elton are, two bona fide NFL starters, and these guys got a long way to go. But I think that they have the skill set where they could develop into that. So, I think as we get into the beginning of the season, depending on where David is, that versatility with those guys is going to matter quite a bit. So we'll kind of see how it goes.
Tom Silverstein.
Yeah, Brian, I guess they would have eaten you if you had taken a quarterback in this draft. But the reality is, you even if Aaron comes back, you only have two arms. How do you get through mini camp and training camp? Do you have to add a veteran, or you think it's going to be an undrafted guy?
We'll add a third arm or maybe a fourth arm as we go through. We've kind of had some conversations before the draft with some veterans, and then there's some rookie guys we're looking at as well. So, but yeah, we would never go into camp with two. We'll at least have three and possibly four.
Jason Wilde.
Hey, Goody, you and 31 other GMs are standing up talking about how happy they are with everything, right? Nobody's going, God, I really screwed up that fifth round. But when you look back, maybe tonight when you're back drinking beers out of the garage fridge with John, Eric, and Woj, yep. I assume you're going to be able to do that? Yes?
Let's hope so.
Okay. What are you happiest about that you accomplished? Was it being able to go back up and get Amari after you considered him at 62? Or what's kind of the one moment from this draft where you feel really good that you were able to do it?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of good moments, Jason. Certainly that was one with Amari, just because I think just where we had him, and when we selected Josh, in some ways you're kind of like, wow, we're probably going to miss out on Amari. So that was obviously a big moment for us. But I think also, we were able to kind of keep the flow of the draft where we didn't have a lot of picks in between. We didn't have like 100 selections in between our picks, which I thought was important. I think the only way we would have done that is if there was a really significant guy we needed to trade up for. And then I think, the way sitting here now, it's the quality of the people. I think as we went down there, through there was we take a lot of pride in the culture that we have in our locker room. And, I really, we got some really good football players that are going to help us win. But there's some really good people, too, that are going to continue to carry the kind of the culture that we have here.
We'll do two more. Mark Daniels.
Brian, the Howard Swamico and Madison fairy tale aside, talk about Cole's game and the potential you see in him.
Yeah, he's a very, very athletic, big man. He has the athleticism to play outside at tackle and kind of dance with those athletes out there. He doesn't have great length, but his athleticism makes up for it, and I think and then inside, I think he's got the quickness to handle the guys inside and just a ton of versatility. He's a smart kid. Like I said, he's been through, Bayport and Wisconsin, two excellent programs. So, football's been a major part of his life for a long time. And I just think he fits our room. He's going to fit in with those guys, and it'll give you guys a lot of stories to write too, that's for sure.
And last one, MK Burgess.
Brian, what is the potential that you see with TJ Slatton and Kenny Clark on that defensive line?
Yeah, obviously TJ's a monster, right? He's got great size, great length. He is really tough to dig out of that inside there. So he's one of those guys that can clog up the middle, eat space, and find the ball. So I think, certainly in, if teams want to run it on us, I think specifically as we get, later in the season, we have an ability to go in there and get big. And that was why we selected him.